Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. This is Muhammad Alshareef with part 4 of the Khutbah preparation prompts. And this is our final part. Jazakumullah khairan for making it all the way to the end here. So let's talk about speaking points. Personal stories. Whenever somebody comes up to me and says to me, Muhammad, I really loved your speech, I always like to say in response to them, well, what part of the speech did you love the most? And it's been my experience that almost, 9 times out of 10, the person will tell me that what affected them the most was the personal story that I mentioned in the speech. Now, I haven't had a super exciting life that's more exciting than your life. It's just that whatever the topic of my speech is, I try to zoom through my life and try to find places and times when there was a lesson that I could share with the audience, okay? So if there's any incidents in your life or things that happened to you where you learned a lesson or analogy about the answer to this question, then put it into your speech. It will be very powerful, inshallah ta'ala. The next thing that you want to add in is there any practical fiqh issue that you can relate to your audience or educate them about? So for example, if I'm talking about the virtue of Ramadan, I could come along and tell people, well, what happens if you wake up in the morning and the sun hasn't come out but the adhan goes on your adhan alarm clock? Are you still allowed to eat? Or, what if you are, continue eating after the adhan alarm clock goes off? Does that break your fast for the day and do you have to make it up? Now, as you can see, something like that, people will be sitting up in their chairs. There is practical benefit and there is something that they can learn from this. If you can find answers to some very practical fiqh issues, add it to your khutbah, it'll make it that much more powerful, inshallah ta'ala. The next thing that you want to put in is some oozingly, interestingly sub-questions, right? Oozingly interesting sub-questions that you want to that your audience would love to hear about. So if we're talking about how to release your inner Queen of Sheba, now maybe the audience, maybe it's an audience of women, and they want to know, well, how do I release my inner Queen of Sheba with my children, for example? Okay, how do I release my inner Queen of Sheba if my husband is abusive to me? So these could be questions that is in the audience's mind, but if you bring it up, you can add it as sub-questions and subtopics in your speech. Another thing that you want to add is analogies, right? So the Quran and Sunnah is filled with analogies, and Allah does it for a reason. We're taught, to understand something complex by an analogy. So if, for example, you're teaching people about the importance of time, you might make an analogy with gold or money and how people, they covet money and they don't want to waste it. And then you could say, well, similarly, your time is valuable like that. You could be talking about, for example, how a person takes a journey through life and make an analogy between driving your car and how sometimes there's red lights, sometimes there's detours, sometimes you're sitting in the passenger seat and there is no driver. Okay, so analogies, if you can bring them into your speech, it's going to make it that much more profound. And then the last point I want to bring up is, what are 2 resources, books or websites that your audience can use for further research? People love that stuff. If you come to, towards the end of your speech and tell people, if you really love this, check out this website or, read this book. Believe me, people will be coming to you after the speech telling you, oh, can you tell me that that book that you quoted again? Can you tell me that, website? They want to write it down. So it's definitely something great. And what's your unforgettable final closing remark? Okay, because at the end of your speech, when you're making those last words, you don't want to say, well, in conclusion, right? You want to have something so profound, and it's great to end with a quote. You want to end with a bang, inshallah ta'ala. So if you want something to be perfect, then it's going to need preparation, and that's what all of this is about, is preparation leads to excellence and not just doing some hodgepodge thing that's gonna wind up with everything turning out like all hodgepodge. Okay. Anyways, that's Muhammad Alshareef. Inshallah ta'ala, I hope you benefited from all of this. If you're interested in learning more about leadership, check out nicheheroleadership.com. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff on that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.